BBC's anti-Israel, intentionally anti-Israel coverage has been well documented. We've covered it on this channel multiple times, and uh, there have been reports. There have been you watch it and you see what's going on. There have been we've done a show about something we'll probably get to later in this episode, where they pretty much fabricated a story, and yet, Owen Jones has recently published, as he calls it, an investigative journalism piece about BBC's bias in favor of Israel, according to his investigative journalism. Uh, this is this is important, even more important than what we usually talk about when we cover Owen Jones. It's important because it's part of the pro-Palestinian or anti-Israel propaganda machine. It's crucial, and I would venture a guess that Owen Jones, when the report came out a few months ago in the Telegraph about the BBC bias, um, uh, that's around the time that he decided, okay, in order to get the BBC maybe to not change their coverage or to be more anti-Israel, we need to claim the opposite, even if the facts are not on our side. Now, there are a lot of factual claims that Owen Jones makes in this reporting, in this piece and in this video about the investigative journalism he's done that we have no way of knowing whether it's true. He's claiming that he interviewed 13 journalists from the BBC and some staffers. He doesn't name any of them. He said he's keeping them anonymous. And again, this may or may not be true, but just to set the background on who Owen Jones is, remember that this is the guy who, among the things we've covered in the past 14 months that he's done, he's denied that Hamas raped anybody on October 7th, and he's denied it, having seen videos of a woman whose body was burnt and was without panties, a woman, Shani Luke, who was the famous images and video of her being dragged almost naked through Gaza with people cheering and abusing her body. The video of some of the terrorists taking a woman to put her into a truck that was taking hostages, and the leader of the terrorists in that group saying, "No, not that one. That one's for raping." All of this was seen by Owen Jones, and much more. And he not only denied that there was any rape, he has also pushed repeatedly claims that there was rape of Palestinians in different cases, at least one of which he had to delete after Al Jazeera deleted it after the woman's family said this is bullshit. So this is also the man who last month, after pro-Hamas terrorists or terrorist wannabes in Amsterdam decided to go on a Jew hunt, filmed themselves saying that they're going on a Jew hunt. There's WhatsApp and Telegram groups, conversations of them talking about how to find the Jews. He said actually it was the Jews' fault because they sang some songs that were mean to Arabs. So this is Owen Jones. Just remember this when you hear factual claims about things that we can't verify in any way. What he's done behind the scenes. But even within all of that, even if everything he says is true in terms of how he conducted his research, he is still obviously full of shit here, and we will talk about why. We're going to talk about the video and watch parts of it today. There will be a link in the chat in the description, and we're going to talk about the piece itself tomorrow on the reality show. Welcome to the Daily Objective. Daniel, happy Festivus. Your thoughts on this? This is definitely a Festivus relevant topic, talking about Owen Jones. Yeah, your thoughts.
Well, that's why I'm in the right colors. No, I think you covered it well. Thank you. No, but I think there are some broad insights you can get from this, and just this idea of claiming that BBC has pro-Israeli bias, that BBC is too much pro-Israeli. And we've seen that before. We've seen that with oftentimes many of the pro-Palestinian Piers Morgan guests oftentimes talk about, with the Tahisi Coates, what is his name? I think something like that. Um, I'll look up his name just so I have it. But he was talking about like no one talks about Gaza no one in American media talks about Gaza. It's like it's only Israeli perspective. And for some time I was trying to how can you have that perspective? Like if we ignore that, if it's not like straight up there just trying to lie, because I think there is something underneath. I think they really believe that Western media or BBC has pro-Israel bias. But how can you have that idea? And it's because they consider the existence of Israel or believing that Israel should exist as being too much pro-Israeli. And I think this is where ultimately it's rooted in the fact that viewing Israel in any way positively or not exclusively only covering uh, Israel negatively or covering Palestinians negatively is automatically puts you in this pro-Israeli camp. Uh, it is really rooted in the idea of tribalism that basically you either agree with me on everything or you're the other side, and this is how they view BBC. If BBC doesn't fully agree with Owen Jones, it's on the other side. And what's the other side? It's the pro-Israeli side. So in this way, if you look at it in this way, of course BBC is too pro-Israeli from that perspective. Every single thing is, because to not be pro-Israeli mean you would have to like celebrate October 7. It would mean you have to celebrate Hamas. That's the only alternative to that sort of like way of thinking.
Okay, we're not going to get through the whole video or even half of it. I want to quickly address a few comments here, very quickly. Susie says he should have been the co-winner of Anti-Semite of the Year with the other Owens. Well, there's what is our award? There's Intellectual Golden Raspberry of the Year award at the Ayn Rand Center UK Awards, which is the show that follows this, and he is nominated for that as well as Candace. So make sure you tune into that live, because you can only vote live unless you're a member, and you can vote live and in advance. Thank you, Bonnie, for the super chat. Thank you, PC, for the super chat. PC says BBC and Jones do not want Israel to exist. Absolutely, and I think they want Israel to go in the worst way possible. I see Christian in the chat. I was gonna get in touch, but glad to see that you're okay, because I know there were some issues there. Okay, let's go to the video.
Is in civil war over its coverage of Israel and Palestine, with journalists there at breaking point because of their outrage at what they regard as systematic pro-Israel propaganda at the corporation. That's a finding of my new detailed investigation into the BBC for the brilliant drop site news. It's based on the testimony of 13 BBC journalists on a huge amount of research and the crucial work of 2 data journalists who I worked with. Do go read the piece at dropsitenews.com. It's a long piece because there's a lot to expose. The link is in the video description. Now, fundamentally, of course, BBC journalists emphasise this is a systemic problem. At one editorial meeting in November 2023, when there were lively heated disagreements in an effort to regain control, Deborah Turness, the CEO of BBC News, declared, "We've got to all remember this all started on the 7th of October. That caused a furious response for BBC staff. Lillian Lander, the former head of the BBC World Service, disagreed, pointing to the decades of Israeli occupation before the 7th of October. She said, "No, I'm going to have to say that's not the case, and I'm sure that's not how you meant to phrase it." I know all this happened because it was corroborated by more than one BBC journalist who was present. Now, as I was working on the piece, more examples kept coming up. I mean, I was leaked the WhatsApp conversation.
More examples, but let's get to this one. So yeah, November. He doesn't tell us when in November 2023. It could have been less than a month, or just after a month, after just more than a month after October 7th. But yeah, of course, the one of the favorite lines of the people who support the massacre on October 7th is history didn't start on October 7th, which of course is true. Palestinians didn't start being committed to the murder and the extermination of the Jews on October 7th. They didn't even start, in the disengagement in 2005 when Israel ended the occupation of Gaza. It didn't start in 1993 with the Oslo Accords when Israel signed a peace deal, gave Palestinians, brought terrorists into the West Bank and Gaza, gave them land to control as the first step in a process intended to end with peace and the creation of a Palestinian state. It didn't start with any of that. It didn't even start with the invention of the Palestinians. It didn't even start with the so-called Nakba, the disaster, according to anti-Israel people, of the creation of Israel and the failure to exterminate the Jews right after the Jewish state was created. Arabs in that area wanted to get rid of the Jews long before that, so that's all true. But this war did start on October 7th. That's when it started. This particular part of the conflict, that's when it started. And Israel doesn't just go and attack Gaza, for no reason. It hasn't in the past. Palestinians kind of step up their attempts to kill Jews, and then Israel responds a little bit. That's what we've seen for 20 years. And this time they did a lot more, and they got a lot more in return. So in that context, yes, it is important when you cover what is going on in Gaza to say that this is Israeli presence in Gaza at the moment is something that would not have happened had there not been October 7th.
Yeah, I mean, this idea of history didn't start on October 7th. Again, it's used exclusively to justify October 7th. That's the purpose of it. It's not used for anything else. It is because if they have to, when we're talking about sort of post October 7th, they have to somehow, get around about what was committed on October 7th. The fact that Hamas and ordinary Palestinians went into Israel, killed random people, kidnapped many of them, hundreds of them, and as well as raped, mutilated them. I mean, that's what happened. There's no way you can get around to it. But if you want to portray Israel as the evil one, if you want to portray Palestinians as the good guys, you have to somehow get around that. And with the current state of I guess still a relatively decent stand on the West, we generally don't support atrocities. Generally, when something like October 7 happens, and we've seen that with rhetoric after October 7, the world was behind Israel. Now that sort of, it happened a long time ago, it happened over a year ago. So now nobody really remembers that, or people like to forget, and it's, what is the most recent news right now. So again, this idea of history didn't start October 7th. It's used exclusively to justify October 7th or to justify the actions of Palestinians. And again, when it comes to sort of like history didn't start on October 7th, also like how far are we going? Like, even if you assume that the way Israel was founded was like done illegitimately, there was like, it was like 80 years ago. Are we still like going back? Like the world looked completely different. At what point do you just say, okay, what is the situation now, and how are we moving from now? Know that 80 years ago there were maybe some Israeli actions that were wrong, that were on the side of Israel. So now we're gonna kill Jews today because of something that was done 80 years ago. It's a similar arguments that we see when people talk about the legacy of slavery on America or something like that. Like we have to punish the people of today for something that happened like hundreds of years ago. At some point, you just have to look at reality and see where we are now. And when you obsess with history as they do, it will lead exclusively to killing the good guys, killing the Jews, killing Israelis. That's how Palestinians can still have some leg to stand on, is because they go to some mystical things there were in the past and use it to basically slaughter Jews today.
Yeah, and of course, there's no point in the past which is if that's the point where you start, then the Palestinians are the good guys in this. But the idea is you start, history starts whenever it's best for making the Palestinian cause. This is why I really object. This is one of the reasons why I really object to pro-Israel people saying Jews were there 2,000 years ago. You were not there 2,000 years ago. Nobody you've ever met has ever met anybody who was there 2,000 years ago. It's completely irrelevant. And if Jews wanted to create a Jewish theocracy, they would not be the good guys. They would be the bad guys, maybe fighting other bad guys. Thank you, Yotam, for the super chat. Yotam says, Owen, Candice, Greta, and Gideon moved to Gaza. Yeah, Gideon Levy, I think, was it him or Ilan Pape who was on Owen Jones's show yesterday? What?
Oh, yesterday, Ilan Pape.
Yeah, yeah, they both deserve their own shows. I think maybe one of them already got it on our channel. We'll get to them. And thank you, PC, for the super chat. PC says, I buy Owen first class flight over there.
First class planes don't go into Gaza.
Yeah.
Well,
also,
actually, no.
I don't think he would fly first class because it's somehow environmentally unfriendly as opposed to coach. I don't ask me how. Yeah, don't worry. Owen Jones has, I'm sure he makes more money in a year than ARCUK's entire budget. He can afford it if he wants to. I think he doesn't travel to Gaza for good reason. There was a comment here. Oh, there it is. Cameron says, I'm just amazed the Guardian still publishes him, which I found interesting that this was published in Dropsite. We're going to talk tomorrow about the Dropsite piece, and I'm going to start that episode with something I have to say about Dropsite itself, just to give the context of who they are, because we, I think, know who Owen Jones is. Okay, let's watch a bit more of the video.
Conversation of multiple BBC correspondents and producers and editors in the Middle East. They're known as the big dogs by BBC management. When the Amnesty report concluded Israel had committed genocide, when that was released, not only the beginning of this month, one of those correspondents noted how the strapline on the BBC was Israel rejects fabricated claims of genocide. One journalist there said, FFS, it's an open goal for those who say we're frit of upsetting the Israelis and keep on couching our stories in an Israel says narrative. Frit means afraid. As one BBC journalist put it to me, these are established senior correspondents and it's even bothering them. Now, the BBC came back to me and said, we take feedback on our coverage seriously, but criticism of BBC output based on a single screenshot taken during a few seconds of coverage or on false assertions that topics haven't been covered when they have is invalid and disingenuous. It's quite funny, they're calling their correspondents there disingenuous. Now, there was another strapline used that day. Amnesty International accuses Israel of genocide. But the BBC kept the report from its main programmes. It was on radio stations, but journalists note the report was not covered at all on the BBC's flagship news programmes. BBC One's News at 1, News at 6, News at 10, Newsnight, the flagship current affairs programme on BBC Two. Now, according to broadcast regulator Ofcom, BBC One is the most frequented news source in Britain. On the 5th of December, the day the Amnesty report was released, 3.7 million viewers tuned into the BBC News at 6 alone. The news channel attracts only a small fraction of that audience, so the vast majority of BBC viewers just would not have come across the report. And on the BBC website itself, the report only appeared 12 hours after the embargo was lifted, as the 7th item in order of importance. But then the BBC failed to put it in the Israel-Gaza tab at the top of the website. That's always there for people to click on. And that meant the traffic was massively reduced. The BBC tell me that was a mistake.
All right. This is a good place to pause. Yeah, okay. For people listening to this on a podcast platform, when Owen Jones read that BBC headline, what is it? Israel rejects fabricated genocide claim or whatever it was. The word fabricated was in quotation marks. He didn't mention that. Why would he? Although he showed it. So it's interesting. Another point where Owen tells us what he thinks of his audience. But yeah, he's unhappy with the BBC not highlighting the Amnesty claim of genocide enough. Now, this is also something we've talked about, these organizations that we know in advance what they're going to say. We don't know how exactly they're going to say it, but we know that when Israel does something to defend itself, they are going to tell us that it is wrong and add whatever words they think they can get away with to explain why it's wrong. And they do this, across the board. So the BBC does tell us what the UN says, what these different organizations say, but here he doesn't like that they didn't highlight it enough. That is his issue with this, and this is an example of the bias. Okay, Daniel, any thoughts on that? Because there's a couple more things I want to get to.
Um, I mean, the way he summarized the Amnesty International story is that Amnesty International has concluded Israel has committed genocide. Now, this might be just him slipping, but this is like an insane way of like recollecting even that story. I mean, and again here I feel like I'm being trolled because again now I have to like defend the sort of like the idea of international law. But if you have like any respect for international law, you would have respect for the ICJ, which is actually the body that does the conclusion of if it was a genocide of no or not. You cannot just like look at something and yeah, that's genocide. I mean, again, it shows like really like he doesn't even take himself seriously. Like he doesn't care for international law when you just like say, oh, it's clear. But again, now I'm like defending international law, so I actually feel trolled because now I have to do that. And the idea about like not covering Amnesty International story. Well, first of all, that story most likely either shouldn't have been covered because it had no basis, it was straight up, or it definitely shouldn't be covered neutrally, like, oh, this is what Amnesty International says, oh, this is what Hamas says, oh, this is what Iranian Guard Corps say. Like, you don't just report on whatever any authoritarian or in this case any like anti-Semitic organization, which Amnesty International at this point definitely is, reports on as if, well, this is what they say, and you just like say it. You put things in context. As like a journalist, you should have some knowledge about general state of the world and be able to put context to certain things. And sort of just reporting Amnesty International story as like, well, this is what they say, is I think wrong way to go about it.
Yeah, and thank you, PC, for the super chat. Yeah, PC also says, Razi, I think even quoting Amnesty is lame. They have a long-standing bias. Yeah, and but they are the experts. They're among the experts that such people, in their cycle of propaganda, they're an important piece of that puzzle.
Yeah, and again, that makes no sense. Why do they have expertise on like international law and genocide convention? They're a humanitarian organization that deals with like human rights issues. But again, that has nothing to do with idea of international law and which well, I guess anyone can have expertise in
No, I
international
think that is kind of their claim to fame, is that they are on the side of international law and they're talking about those violations, but it just tells us what we already know about international law and what it's for, at least how it's used. Okay, let's see if we can make it through well, at least one more clip.
One BBC journalist said that was desperate, by the way. I want to explain how this piece came about. I was first contacted by a BBC journalist about the killing of Mohammed Bahar in July. He was a 24-year-old Palestinian man with Down syndrome and autism. He needed round-the-clock care from his family. He was terrified and traumatized by an Israeli onslaught he didn't understand. On the 3rd of July, the Israeli military raided his home, and as the family begged for mercy, the Israeli army set their dog on this 24-year-old man with Down syndrome and autism as he begged for it to stop. This injured young man was put in a separate room and locked away while the family were driven away at gunpoint. They eventually returned. A week later, they found his decomposing body. Now, in the Middle East Eye correctly headlined this: Palestinian with Down syndrome left to die by Israeli soldiers after combat dog attack. The Independent covered it with Gaza man with Down syndrome mauled by Israeli attack dog and left to die, family says. The BBC's original headline: the lonely death of Gaza man with Down syndrome. What the BBC journalist took me through was a constant.
Hang on. So first of all, that Owen Jones is a liar and a grifter is not news, but this is even for him, again, he is completely counting on his audience not checking a word of what he's saying. So this was originally in the BBC, right? If I'm remembering correctly, we covered this twice. Once right after it came out, when we said, this doesn't look right, and then after I forget, it was David Collier, the journalist who actually did research about it and showed that this was complete bullshit. So this is as fabricated a story as possible. Yes, there was a person with Down syndrome who was killed there, but what Owen doesn't tell you, and I guess the BBC kind of has some sort of legal obligation to tell you, but also didn't tell you, is that this is a family of terrorists. From the father through the children. These are terrorists, and that's why Israel was there. If you just hear Owens's version of it, it sounds like Israel said, "Oh, we looked in the records and we saw that there's a kid with Down syndrome here, or a guy with Down syndrome. Let's go there and send our dog on him." No, that's not what happened. And the family found him a week later because the family didn't go back to check. So this is as this is a typical BBC story, which is fabricated to make you hate Jews. And Owen Jones is complaining that they didn't do enough to make you hate Jews because because of the headline. Seriously, that's what we just heard there, Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, and something he, of course, the way he covers it, like this is what happened, as if like he was there, or we have camera footage or anything. No, this is all recollection from the the mother of the boy who died. That's it. That's what the BBC story was based on. It was just at the end it said, oh, and IDF didn't comment on this yet, but the story was already published, all based on just like one testimony of one mother. So again, like taking this as like a full story is, I mean, it shows that. Yeah, you can report on anything, and the fact that these journalists like don't put it in context, so then Owen Jones can spin it in any way he wants, and if someone doesn't check, then that's what they'll get. Is again, it shows really like how news stories or sort of reportings you have to be careful about that, because you can easily not lie but very mislead, and in Owen's case it's much closer to straight up lying. And someone said Amnesty International doesn't care about the hostages. Well, in their report they called for the release of the civilian hostages, so they can still keep some of the Israeli hostages, but they called for some release.
Yeah. Okay. Look, the award show will have to wait a few minutes. I want to get to something. I don't remember if it's immediately after, so we'll watch a bit more of the clip and see if it is. Thank you, PC, for the super chat. PC says he is a bad man. That's it. That's true, but he's a bad man with a very large audience of people who buy his bullshit, which is why we cover him as uncomfortable as it is to even listen to the guy. We're gonna listen to him a bit more.
Framing of stories on terms favourable to Israel. When the IDF killed a 16-year-old Palestinian girl, it was all framed in pro-Israel terms. The headline, Israel says likely killed Palestinian girl in error. The first paragraph, Israel says its forces appear to have unintentionally killed a 16-year-old Palestinian girl amid a gun battle with militants in the occupied West Bank. Can you imagine if it was the other way around? Can you imagine a 16-year-old Israeli girl who'd been killed by Palestinian militants? What, do you think they'd frame the headline, Palestinian militants say they likely killed Israeli girl in error?
Right. Okay. This is the bit I wanted to get to. This is Owen Jones using the BBC's anti-Israel way of reporting as if it is pro-Israel. The Israel says thing. No, you can't imagine them saying Hamas says 500 people killed in an Israeli airstrike on El Ali Hospital, because they didn't. They said 500 people were killed by an Israeli airstrike on El Ali Hospital. That is fact. When it's Israel, they add the Israel says because they know their audience has been already prepared for to expect that Israel is lying about everything they say. So the Israel says thing is an anti-Israel way of reporting, but Owen Jones is complaining about that. Again, if you needed more to know more about Owen Jones, that should be quite a lot. Daniel.
Yeah, and also just one thing to wrap up about reporting of accidentally. It's because Israel on purpose doesn't try to kill civilians. Hamas does. So there is no way you can report that Hamas thinks they accidentally killed a civilian because that's their purpose. So you would never like report on, you would never see such a headline. So this is also like, trying to put IDF and Hamas as sort of like two equivalent organizations is in itself evil, because you are taking a legitimate an army of a legitimate country to a terrorist organization and trying to like have same standards for them.
All right, since we are out of time, I just want to quickly, there was a comment here. So many ads on YouTube about Palestinian kids and whatever, and then the same person says, no one has explained to me yet why I should feel sympathy for people who hate me. Well, kids are always innocent, including, if their parents are terrorists, the kids are innocent. What you should feel is hatred towards the Palestinian adults, but that's not what those ads are telling you, but that is what we try to explain on this channel. We'll continue to do that tomorrow when we talk about Israeli media, and then about this report as it appears on Dropsite News. We will also start by explaining what Dropsite News is, because that's important. Yeah, the Ayn Rand Center UK Awards starts right after this show. You can vote during the show after we tell you what each category is. So make sure you tune in live. This one is important to watch live. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, everybody, for watching, and we'll see you in a couple of minutes.